Hi there, I'm Decoding Trolls. This is Finding Manuland, and I am on the road. As you can see, it's very snowy here. I'm in eastern Anatolia, and I'm hopefully heading towards Van Lake, which I once saw from an aeroplane traveling back to Ukraine from India. And I now, because of Finding Manuland, that was several years ago, 2019, as I was traveling over the Van Lake. I didn't know where it was or what it was. It just was absolutely stunning. And now here we are, 2025, almost 2026. And I have an organizing focus, which is Finding Manuland. And that's the third part of every podcast and every aspect of Finding Manuland is it becomes an organizing focus for our travels and for our life and for wherever we are. If we find ourselves in a place which where they traditionally speak Indo-European languages, then Finding Manuland can provide an element, a plot line, as it were, to look for the traces of the Indo-Europeans in the last 6,000 years. And that's the first part or the second part, rather, of Finding Manuland, every Finding Manuland episode, which is to transform, as it has done me, our mental models of time and space, of history. So for us, most of us, we began life thinking of Greece and Rome or Egypt being the oldest. But for me, what I'm trying to communicate is the advent of Indo-European languages and its imminence in our culture, which began around 4100 BCE in, as far as we know, according to the latest ancient DNA evidence, in Mykolaiivka village in Zaporizhia in eastern Ukraine, around where the Russians and the Ukrainians are currently fighting. It's not occupied by Russia, this particular village, which I'm very happy about. And in terms of space, I want to fill up the void which many of us have between Ireland and India. There's many little blank spaces. I still have many of them. But before I found Manuland, and before I started the Finding Manuland project and started visiting Anatolia a lot, which most of us know by its current name of Turkey, I didn't really have a strong conception of Turkey. And now I keep on coming back here, mainly because it's just such a fascinating, beautiful place. As you can see, look at this. It's not really what you associate with Turkey, because we probably go on holiday here a lot. I come on holiday here a lot, but not only to the sea. I mean, I look forward to a time when I know Turkey so well that I don't have to go on these amazing epic journeys and I can just sit by the sea in the Turkish Riviera. Well, actually, I don't really look forward to that. But anyway, and then the first element is obviously MN, the MN sound, which I believe is a monument immanent in all of our language, almost every sentence we speak, of the first Indo-Europeans. But not only that, but it's an immanence which signifies exchange and energy exchange. And it's this element in Finding Manuland that I'm really interested in, because I started off, as I've told you, with this hypothesis that I didn't really understand why this MN sound was in the mythological founders' names of the great Indo-European traditions. Manu in India, the first human, the first sacrificer. Manus in Germanic culture, two N's. Mananan, Ireland's preeminent pre-Christian deity, pre-Christian god, and Manawadan, and even in Kyrgyzstan we have Manus, the Manus, which are the which is the sort of the Kyrgyzstan's epic poem. We have the Brahmanas, which were first written down in 1100 BCE by the Brahmin. So we have, anyway, this MN sound everywhere, and I believe my hypothesis, my working hypothesis, my organizing fiction in Finding Manuland is that we use this as a means of transforming our mental models of time and space, as also an organizing focus for journeys, because some of us are lucky enough to have the opportunity to travel, maybe not as much as we want, and we can travel now at our desk, as I do, through scholarly publications and art and literature, and also physically, as I'm doing here now. And I plan to bring you and continue for the rest of my life to bring you on these amazing journeys with this organizing focus about the MN sound. So today, we're full of little plot lines. Always, our lives are full of little plot lines, and all art must be full of little plot lines. So today, the big question is, will I get to Van? I tried to get here last night, and there was one road over a mountain, and at a certain point I was stopped there, and there was lots of people stopped there. It looked a bit like, I don't know what was going on, maybe some sort of security incident, because there was a lot of kind of special forces kind of people there. And I said to the traffic policeman, shall I wait? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, might I have to wait all night? Should I go and find a hotel? And he said, yeah. So I did that. I went to this really interesting town nearby, where I went for a nice 10-kilometer jog this morning around the town in the snow, which was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And so here we are. So I don't know whether I'm going to make it. There's the snowplow. Hopefully he'll come this way as well, or she will come this way, or they probably did come all this way already. So the big plot line is, will I get to Van, where I had booked a hotel, and I have booked a hotel and hope to spend a few days there exploring. And really what we're doing on this journey, I'm iterating, so I don't quite know what I'm going to find, obviously, but the place where we're going, which hopefully we'll reach today, Van, this massive lake which I once saw from the aeroplane, basically is a meeting point of great empires. We first have the Kura Araxes culture, which I call an empire. Strictly speaking, they don't call it an empire. It's a culture, it's an archaeological culture, which was born in present-day Armenia between the Kura River, which is just inside Georgia, and then the Araxes River, which marks the boundary, the border, the international border with between Armenia and Turkey. And the Kura-Araxes culture was about 3,500 BC to about 2000 BCE, and that spread from there basically over the whole of Anatolia. At the same time as the Kura-Araxes culture was kind of fading, we have the Mesopotamian, Babylonian, Akkadian language, and Assyrian cultures, which are very important in finding Manuland. So that's basically around 2,800 BCE up or down, you know what I mean, towards 1800 BCE. And some of you might remember last Christmas I was also in Anatolia, and I was in search of the first writing in any Indo-European language, which I found in, as I hoped I would, but it exceeded my wildest expectations, really, in this amazing museum in Ankara, founded by Celts, Indo-Europeans, around 300 BCE. And you might remember, I found, I'll post it here, the cuneiform tablet, which was a contract for the sale of a slave from an Indo-European language-speaking person, selling their brother and their son into slavery, with Tarmana, another native Anatolian, as the sign in the museum said. And why I say it exceeded my wildest expectations was I was hoping to find the earliest Indo-European writing, and there I find it, and it's Tarmana. So he's got an MN sound in his name. So that particular cuneiform tablet, written in the cuneiform script in Assyrian, but we know Tarmana, the name, was a native Anatolian name, was found in Kultepe, Kanesh, which I visited in the summer of 2024. You might remember my visit there, and I'll continually reference it. And Kanesh is from Kisari, which is this kind of crossroads in Anatolia and Turkey, an amazing area with lots of really interesting things. But the thing which most interests me is this town of Kultepe, Kanesh, which was an Assyrian trading colony, among other things. and they brought their form of writing there, and that is the first writing in any Indo-European language which is extant. And out of Kultepe, Kanesh, 400 years later, and another location which I visited in November or in October 2023, which I've also spoken about, but not extensively yet, Bogashkoy, which is the capital of the Hittite Empire. And the Hittite Empire stretched to Lake Van, where we're hopefully heading today. And so this meeting point, so the Hittite Empire was from like 1500 BCE to around 1100 BCE. And the Kanesh Kultepe cuneiform tablets, 23,000 of them found there in the late 19th, early 20th century, and now through lots of miracles, which we'll speak about again and again, we can now translate them. And it's among those tablets we found this one that I saw last year in the Museum of Anatolian Civilizations in Ankara. So the amazing thing about this point, this Van Lake, so obviously just from purely personal interest point of view, I saw it once from an airplane. Never imagined in my wildest dreams I would one day visit there. I'm not even sure while I was on the plane I knew where it was. It could have been Iraq, because we flew from India over Iraq, old Mesopotamia. And so now, because of finding Manuland, I'm heading there, and we don't know whether we're going to get there today, so we'll see about that. So that's a nice little plot line in this. And so we have these different Kura Araxes culture, this amazing culture which stretched all the way from Armenia to the Levant, and we know it through its architecture or its archaeology, and then we also have the Hittite Empire stretches to there, to this amazing to this lake. And then we also have the Mitanni culture, which wasn't really a culture, but it is a culture. It was an empire. It's a great empire, and we know of the Mitanni Empire because the first treaty in international law is between the Mitanni and the Hittites. And an interesting aspect of the Mitanni is they had what scholars often call Aryan gods. So this treaty, there's a lot of talk in Ukraine, at contemporary Ukraine, and its war of independence against Russia, war for independence against Russia. Who will guarantee the security treaty? Will it be NATO, Article 4 like security guarantees? But the old solution for this was in the first treaty, which we have between the Mitanni and the Hittites, is they swore oaths, and if anyone breaks this treaty, then they will be called upon the wrath of Mitrashili, who is cognate with an Iranian and also an Indian god, Mitra, a god of juridical. So that's the kind of god of oaths, really, literally, Mitra and Varuna, in Indian culture, which came from Iran, and the Mitanni, and in Indra, the god, obviously the supreme deity for whom India is named, and Indra is one of the guarantors of this amazing treaty from about 1500 BCE between the Mitanni and the Hittites. And Van Lake, where we're hopefully headed today, was where these great empires met. And so we also have Van is most famous for the Van Empire, or Artu, which is about 800 BCE onwards. The second founder of that was Menua, who again I've spoken before about in a post about Armenia in about November 2023, which is a very important post. And I was speaking to a scholar, an Armenian scholar this week actually, who alerted me to a paper I haven't yet seen by another amazing Armenian scholar called Armen Petrosian, who's also scratching around many of the same themes that I am in finding Manuland. And in it, this contemporary Armenian scholar, mentioned to me that Armen Petrosian has demonstrated that although the Urartu Empire, the Van Empire, amazingly, I'm going quite slowly. Well, I suppose I am recording this at the same time, but these buses keep on coming. There's one firing by me. I think he's gonna pass me on the inside, which is fine if he's willing to do that, or if he wants me to move over, I will. I'm not quite sure what he's doing. He's passing me on the inside. Thank you. You're going to see this. I've got to slow down a little bit just in case I slip and slide. So this gives me confidence I'm on the road. Jesus Christ, he's cutting. So this gives me confidence I can make it, at least, although he's in a very big bus. But anyway, so Armen Petrosian has apparently demonstrated that although the Urartun kings, they spoke a Semitic language, the kings themselves had Indo-European names, which I'd kind of deduced from Manuland. And this is another important aspect of finding Manuland, which is it's predictive. So often you can see what's going on with you can make predictions about data according to the MN sound. It's also, and so it's also a meeting point between the Van kingdom and many of us will have encountered Ararat or Urartu from the Bible, because at the time Noah's Ark, for instance, settled in the Ararat Mountains, which is this great mountain that I've seen a lot of and was camping close to last night. And they got a bad press in the Bible because this is around most of the Old Testament is written around in the first millennium, basically. And around that time, the Urartu kingdom was sort of prehistory at that point, but they were the enemies of Israel, and that's why they got a bad press, basically, in the Bible, and so this whole idea that they were sinners and that God sent down the flood to flood them because they're bad people, gives them quite a bad press. Now we know from different texts, and particularly this story series called Gilgamesh, which I've talked about a little, but not very much, but I will come back to it again and again, because it's a great source of data, and actually it's also connected with the Hittites, because now we found the Hittites library around 1907 or something. So we've got about 10,000 documents from there, which have now been which not all of them have been translated, but a lot of them have. Amazing work to learn how to translate cuneiform and these texts. And in there we have several versions of the Gilgamesh tale, and Noah's Ark appears in it first, but not based around Ararat. So it's a good source. And actually I have a great text about that, which I think I'll probably talk about on this visit, because it's relevant to where we're going. So the Van Lake was the center of this Ararat empire, which then we're going forward to 600 BCE to maybe 400 BC, and Darius the Great began what's known as the Achaemenid Empire. And discerning listeners will notice the MN sound in Achaemenid Empire. Darius the Great is very important for finding Manuland, but also for my other project, Dis and Folklore, and this idea of truth, because he not only did he create this enormous empire over the old boundaries of the Hittite Empire and various different, the Babylonian and Assyrian Empire, but he also did these huge, going all the way over to Greece and fought against the Greeks. And not only did he that, but there's these huge inscriptions on big rocks, which sadly I don't think until the mullahs leave we won't be visiting Iran, which is a great pity. Quite close to it today. But I can't go there. But we have the inscriptions which are written on the rock, and it's this idea which is very central to my other work, and indeed to Indo-European governance, of the truth of the sovereign. Upon the truth of the sovereign depends the welfare and the health of the community and MN community as well. And Darius's inscriptions demonstrate that Rata, meaning truth, or Arta rather, means truth, and Draga, the lie. So as soon as the sovereign begins to lie, their kingdom, their empire goes into decline. But from a Van point of view, so Darius the Great conquered Van, the Van kingdom, the Van empire, and then we had the great Armenian empire, which came over the bones of parts of the Hittites and parts of the Achaemenid Empire, and was a great empire all the way up to 1856, when the Russians lost the First Crimean War, and then they had to give away, under the Treaty of Paris, which ended the war, they had to give away the Armenia's territory, including Mount Ararat, which is a source of great pain and sadness for obvious reasons for Armenians today, to this day, and certainly is a reminder that any unfair peace of the Second Crimean War will have long-reaching, centuries-long meanings, and I don't think the Ukrainians are going to surrender their territory very easily, as we see. So the point being that Van, this place where we're going, so there's an amazing archaeological museum, which I'll go there. I'm not that interested in the Urartu, but I'm actually more interested in them now that I see that I'm not the only scholar who thinks that Menua, the Amen, the son of the founder of the Urartu Empire, the Amen sound, I believe that's where it went into Armenia, and the names of Armenia's mythological and actual founders were Indo-Europeans. So that's really that. So suddenly, actually, that is that's the amazing thing about finding Manuland, really, because the more I look, the more I open up. And when I say I think this is a lifetime's worth of material in finding Manuland, I really mean it. So I think and also just a few more plot lines. I'm going to be going to a few more other places. Going to go to a place called Urfa, Sanliurfa. Going to go to Andiaman, which is near Nemrut, which is this mountain with lots of amazing statues. That is where this people called the Mandaeans, which were obviously in reasons I was very interested in. And I first discovered the Mandaeans in the context of 19th century literature, and that called them Iranians. But now, actually, ancient DNA studies tell us the Mandaeans are mainly, they're basically the remnant of the Babylonians empire, but they do have about 25% Indo-European Iranian genes, and so they probably it's kind of the reverse of the Armenians, who are Indo-Europeans, and or the Urartuans, Urartu, who were Semitic language, but their founders had Indo-European names, which is kind of a common theme. There's many different ways in which the Indo-Europeans conquered. There isn't just this one method. So the whole of the islands of Ireland and Britain were conquered, and the entire male genome disappears. But in India, it was the Brahmin, it was Indo-Europeans, it was Yamna, people from the steppe, from ancient Ukraine, who conquered the land, going all the way down to modern Bengaluru, where you have this split, the Dravidian, with a pre-Indo-Europeans, non-Indo-European part of India. And so that was an elite capture. You have, and the Brahmin, they took over the religion, the name, the modern state, all came from an elite. And here we have with the Mandaeans, DNA evidence shows, I have to slow down because these poor birds, that they probably took their name, the Mandaeans, from the Indo-European, from the Amen. And I'll just leave it on the greatest discovery that I made last year, really, on foot of finding this cuneiform tablet with Charmana's name on it, MN sound, from between 1900 and 1800 BCE in Kanesh, Kultepe, is that when I then looked at the scholarly texts, as there are amazing scholarly texts, into what is called in the game Canacite Hittite, which is kind of the Proto-Hittite. So we have these 10,000 texts from 1500 BCE, or many of which are in Hittite from the Bogashkoy, the Imperial Library. And so when we go back to Kanesh 400 years ago, before that, which in the Hittite text is the mythological founding place, the homeland of the Hittites, and then we find out that this is actually true, that the modern scholars decrypting these texts have determined that the Uman suffix, again MN and Uman suffix, if you see that in any name in these Assyrian documents, then you know it's a native, what the museum called a native Anatolian, in Indo-European name of it. And this is the best discovery ever, because again, I started out years ago not knowing any of this, and here I find a scholar who knows nothing of my work, a great linguist, who basically what you're trying to do in these documents found in an Assyrian trading colony in Kanesh and Kultepe, you're trying to discern, so what words and sounds in these documents are native Anatolian, are Indo-European. We know the Hittites were Indo-European. This has been demonstrated since 1921, really, when a Czech artillery officer, who, like myself, was a bit of an amateur, made an amazing discovery by looking at inscriptions, and he worked out this formulaic inscription, which was found in, at the time they didn't know what these inscriptions language they were. They didn't know what they thought it was Luwian, but it turns out it was Hittite, and he was able to work out that the sound tu, you, meaning you, which is endemic in Indo-European languages, was also in this inscription. And then various others, k, the other word k, meaning who, was also found. And basically he hypothesized that Hittite was an Indo-European language, and for about 30 years many professional linguists poo-pooed the idea, but it turned out to be true when someone cracked the code using, in fact, Darius the Great's these massive rock-cut inscriptions in Iran, on the rocks, which are still there in 3 different languages, the same text in 3 different languages. That really helped scholars crack cuneiform, which enabled them to crack the Babylonian text, the Assyrian texts found in southern Mesopotamia, and Van marks the northern Mesopotamian border. Be traveling around a lot there. And then this other place called Karatepe, which I visited in July 2024, which I've spoken about before, and again we'll come back to it because it's very important for the DN sound and for cracking what we now know to be Luwian, because again on this statue was inscriptions in Phoenician, but also in Luwian, using 2 different alphabets, using cuneiform but also the Phoenician alphabet. And so so we know from the Uman sign, so the scholars looking at it they're trying to discern what in all these documents, we know what is the Assyrian, but we don't know what is the native Anatolian, and the native Anatolian is basically the Indo-European element, which is the Indo-European names in it. And this scholar determined that if you see an Uman suffix, and there's many of them in it, that this is definitely Indo-European. So this is again proof of the predictive quality of the MN sound and of the Finding Manuland method. It's not just about tourism, it's not just about changing mental models, it's not just about energy exchange, which I'm not going to talk about today because I'm going to try and finish this before we get run off the road. It helps us communicate, it helps us determine, it helps makes predictions. And so this linguist who knows nothing of my work determined that the Uman sound is intrinsically Indo-European, which means that the Hittites, who were the first attested Indo-European language, whose descendants arrived in Anatolia via this place called Areni 1, the Areni 1 cave and the Areni 1 man in the cave, we now know through ancient DNA, carried with them the MN sound, and it passed into the names, the monikers of people, and into places where they're from. And I'm going to leave it at there for now, and next time I speak, you'll see whether or not I made it to Van.